vamos a empezar con nuestra primera pregunta, que es ¿cuáles son las estrategias y mecanismos que han sido exitosas para ustedes en la entrega de recursos recaudados hacia iniciativas y organizaciones locales? Entonces, Alina, me encantaría que tú pudieras empezar contándonos y después Erika.
Yes, I want to start us with a bold assertion that any development goal that you might have can be approached through grant making. In some of the fields of the community life, this works quite easily because there are already good organizations that can carry the work and you can support these organizations. But in other fields, in order to achieve this impact, you already have to think a few steps ahead, like in chess playing. So we're going to talk today about how we can use grant making very strategically, even if the amounts of money that you may have available to give grants is not very high. So in order to do this, basically each step on the way, you can have some clear objectives. For example, one of the grant making objectives could be to start conversations on a topic that maybe is new to the community, or on a theme that people don't already have solutions on. So one grant round can can be focused just on starting these conversations. Another ground round can be focused on identifying leaders of projects that can experiment some of these solutions. Another ground round can be focused on learning between these initiatives. Another ground round can be focused on consolidating some of the better initiatives. Another ground round can be focused on supporting a movement to work in partnerships. So basically, the grant making process is not something that you do in a similar way. It's something that always is connected to the development goals that you have. And this is my main assertion, that grant making has to be a tool for development. And this is what makes it interesting and creative. So that's what I would like at the end of this session, that we would not look at grant making as a technical tool, as a dry tool that has to do with money and bureaucracy, but look at it much more as a way to engage with key stakeholders from the community so you can achieve development goals and social change. And you can help innovation through the use of grant making in your community. So basically, rather than seeing grant making as a transactional tool, I would like us to look at it as a transformative tool, and that you see this being part of a larger mechanism that you are creating for new solutions in the community, for collaboration and for other goals that are important to you, like building active, cohesive, generous communities. Many of you, I think, have been recipients of grants, so I would like, if you indulge me, to take just 30 seconds to think about one grant that you received which was really helpful to you, and maybe one grant that you received which was problematic. Even if money came into the picture, there were more complications around that process. Maybe it put at risk some relationships in the team. Maybe it put a lot of bureaucratic pressure. Maybe you could not adapt to new circumstances because of the grant money. So if you have these experiences on both sides of good grants and bad grants, let's call them, the good news is that now, as a community foundation, you are in a position to craft a grant making process that will be really helpful for the community members. Depending on the legal framework in your country, some of these bureaucratic requirements might still be there and not avoidable. And we can look at this as a transaction cost. So this is why it is important that the value of the grant making process will be much higher than this cumulative transaction costs that come with the bureaucratic requirement. And the other assertion that I would make is that each grant making process has to be designed in a different way, depending on where community members are, how much experience exists, what you have done before. And it has to be a creative and imaginative process and not a copy-paste process where we use the same tools that we have used in other previous grant-making processes and so on. So that's my encouragement, that you can actually design very interesting grant-making processes, and it's not a technical and bureaucratic thing. So how can you adapt these funds for this variety of needs and situations in the community? There is a big variety in terms of who will receive the money. Will you give money to established organizations or to new leaders? Can you provide money to coalitions or movements, or do you see them as being given to different organizations independently? How big are the grant amounts? That's another thing that you can plan. And many community foundations, at least in Romania and the region, use a lot of small grants. And then it's very important to be very realistic what can be achieved with, let's say, $1,000. The fact that there is some money engaged does not mean that a big problem can be solved right away. So this level of realism is quite important. What can change with these small amounts in the community? It's also interesting. And from my perspective, what changes the most is the experience of the grantees, their capacity to learn new things, their capacity to understand better a certain issue. So the next time they come at it, they will be in a better position. So if your grant making is quality grant making, at the end of the story, not just some project results have been achieved, but the capacities of the players in the community, of your grantees, have been enhanced. There is more knowledge, there is more trust, there is more connection. And that's what makes grant making developmental, in my view. And also, it's interesting to look at it that it doesn't have to be just project grants. Sometimes you can offer grants for learning. And yeah, and sometimes you can offer grants that are more flexible, something like those called general purpose grants, or you can offer grants for development of a certain organization or for development of a coalition. So I would like us to expand our thinking about grant making and not just look at these small projects. And then the last variable is if you see grants as one-time things or you see them as a part of a long-term process. And my encouragement would be to see them as a part of a long-term process, because this will allow this learning to take place. And by the time that an initiative learns better, having a new opportunity to put the same project or an improved one in practice is going to be very important. So my encouragement would be to think about even free iteration of the grants before moving to kind of new initiatives, and not just giving a little bit of money, but seeing this in a long-term relationship. Some examples of grant making in Romania, and yes, my beginning thing is going to be a bit long, and then the rest of questions, they're going to be smaller. Basically, many times in Romania, community foundations will be the first grant maker to some projects. There will be a group of people that meet the first time because they want to do something about the park in between their blocks, or because they want to have a sense of a neighborhood community doing something together, or because they want to put an innovative idea into practice about using an old factory and give it back to the community as a hub space. All these are examples from practice where community foundations in Romania were the first grantor to these initiatives. And some of these initiatives then become formalized, and some of these initiatives then grew into something much bigger. But the foundations were there to be the one that makes this initial investment, that is the first investor that trusts that group and helps them grow the capacity. And I think that's what happened a lot in the case of Romania. Or some of the thematic funds, like the youth banks, were supporting young people from high school, also informal groups, initiative groups, not formal NGOs. And again, the foundation was the first grant maker in that situation. Also, in the case of Romania, it's interesting to look where the money comes from and how that influences the grant making process. We have these corporate funds where most of the money comes from companies. We have thematic funds where the foundation creates the fund because they see a need and they want to approach it, and then they bring money from a variety of donors. Basically, in both situations, quite interesting grant making was possible. And even in the case of companies, the foundations actually persuaded the companies to invest in these new initiatives in innovative ways or in groups that were not very active before.
Bueno, mira, un mecanismo que nosotros utilizamos y que ha resultado muy bueno es el de repartir los recursos mediante convocatorias. La convocatoria es un proceso que ayuda a la organización que está pidiendo el recurso, ayuda a ordenarse, ¿no? Pone en blanco y negro su causa, su proyecto, sus límites y alcances y lo plasma en un documento. La convocatoria puede ser abierta cuando el donante, nosotros le llamamos inversionista social a quien aporte el dinero para repartir, porque queremos en un proceso de formación y educación al donante, pues queremos que se convierta en un inversionista social, ¿no? Que vaya hombro a hombro con la causa con la que está apoyando, con un grado de compromiso mayor. Entonces, por eso le llamamos inversionista social, pero finalmente es quien aporta el dinero. Y entonces, si él quiere hacerla abierta, se elige un tema, educación, niñez, medio ambiente, y se lanza una convocatoria abierta a que cualquier institución que cumpla esos requisitos presente su proyecto. Pero también puede ser cerrada, donde se hace por invitación, y entonces comunidad hacemos una selección previa de las organizaciones invitadas y los invitamos. Por otro lado, en este proceso de la convocatoria, la primera fase es definir las bases. Las bases son los límites y alcances de esa convocatoria, y ahí entra muy importante el rol de la fundación comunitaria en asesorar al donante, porque el donante o el inversionista social o los tomadores de decisiones de a dónde va el recurso, generalmente quieren hacer algo, pero pues quien sabe cómo hacerlo y hacerlo mejor, en teoría somos las fundaciones comunitarias, ¿no? Entonces entramos en un proceso de asesoría donde empezamos a ayudarle a ver, enfócate en la causa. Luego hay fondos que quieren ayudar como a 18,500 causas y entonces no mueven ninguna aguja. Entonces, en esa base es cuál es la causa, cuál es el rango en el que quieres dar para que la asociación sepa el tipo de proyecto y el monto que te pida. A veces tú tienes nada más 10,000 pesos y la asociación te presenta un proyecto de 10 millones. Entonces, bueno, entre más le des información a la asociación que te va a pedir el donativo de tus límites y alcances de tus criterios, pues es más fácil el camino para todos, ¿no? También asesoramos al inversionista de que se case a largo plazo, que a veces no es tan pertinente nada más dar un peso aquí y al otro año otro allá y otro allá. Entonces no vas con un acompañamiento más estratégico. Los criterios que vas a poner para seleccionar, toda esa información hay que hacérsela ver a la organización que va a pedir para que sea mucho más fácil, profesional y ordenado este proceso de convocatoria. Entonces, por un lado, ha sido exitoso este procedimiento porque te ayuda a ti, como tomador de decisiones, a conocer y entender, a dimensionar el proyecto que estás evaluando para decidir si apoyas o no. Pero por otra parte, también le ayuda a las organizaciones, porque muchas veces las organizaciones, cada vez menos en México, pero todavía tenemos, pues estaban acostumbradas a pedir nada más de, pues lo conozco, déjale pido, aquí en la calle se lo pido, le mando una cartita, sin mucho conocimiento de causa y documentación del proyecto. Entonces, este esfuerzo o este mecanismo de que presenten su proyecto mediante convocatoria ha ayudado a las organizaciones, especialmente a las chicas, a las que van haciendo, para que pongan en blanco y negro y le piensen todo y más de su proyecto y lo sepan vender. Entonces, también es una manera y un compromiso que tenemos las fundaciones comunitarias cuando das recursos, no nada más repartirlo bien, sino ayudarle y llevar a la organización social a que sea más profesional, a que presente mejor su proyecto, a que investigue más de su causa, a que la documente. Entonces, ese mecanismo de convocatoria, trabajando por un buen formato para que la asociación crezca y aprenda, y por unos buenos criterios para que el donante crezca y aprenda, ha sido el mecanismo que hemos utilizado desde hace 9 años y nos ha resultado muy bien.